This is our July garden tour. This year, in keeping with everybody else in Europe, our weather has been bizarre and we never normally have flowers like this in July. So although the grass wants cutting and various things want deadheading and the like, we thought we would give you a garden tour before the sun, which is now coming up to 30s for a few days, kills off all the plants. We'll just walk up the steps to the serpentine bed where all the flowers are at present. This year the Nicotiana have been a great success, but I think once it gets very hot they won't be. I've tried to grow a lot of alströmerias this year because they seem to do well in our garden. And up to now they are doing well. I try to grow agapanthus every year, but they don't seem to multiply. But the bits that are out are pretty. This plant's a soap plant. They used to use it for doing their washing. It's actually wild, but I think it looks pretty, so I let it grow where it wants to. The buddleias are just coming out. This salvia's been a great success. It survived the winter, the frost, and it doesn't need watering in the summer. More Nicotiana and alströmerias. The aster's just coming out, as is another buddleia. And then the perovskia, which is a plant that's just like concrete.
We were trying to beat the early morning artisans working.
The dahlias are just coming into their best. I've tried to reorganise the garden so that we have plants which survive all conditions, and the Lignis and the Verbena Wagneriensis certainly survive anything. These echinops are also plants that survive all conditions. Here, this part of the garden, the oak trees take all the water, so it has to be plants that just survive in drought conditions. Lavenders everywhere have been marvellous this year. They obviously like the rain and the sun. We love the lavender, but so do the bees. A lot of the new white beds now gone over, but it is featuring at present a cardoon, which I have been trying to grow for years. This one grew itself. It self-seeded and grew, with no effort from me. The cypresses are doing fine, as is the stachys around them. And the rambling rectors that we bought last year to make a screen are starting to make a screen. Sometimes you have successes out of disasters. The frost took all the lilies that I planted here, but I had a few cleomes and had some zinnia seeds, and I just threw them in, hoping that something would happen. And I think it looks rather pretty. Zoom in on that zinnia there, the zelt. Whilst the roses have gone over, the lavender is still doing its thing. The geraniums in front of the house have been a success this year. Whilst the exotic bed is not at its height yet, we're pleased as it's coming along. Even the pitcher plant has grown well this year. At last, John's efforts at growing a wisteria have come to fruition. Unfortunately, the ones we bought earlier in the year got hit by the frost.
As did this maple we bought too early.
This is the back courtyard. Or you could call it the rabbit nursery, as we have a number of baby rabbits living in the stachys bed. The shady woodland bed continues to mature. The azaleas were really hit by the frost, but they seem to have recovered. So far the experiment of growing ferns this year seems to have worked. I was worried that temperatures would be too hot and it would be too dry, but of course this year hasn't been like that, so they've been all right. We will see in the future. A number of the hydrangeas were also hit by the frost, and they certainly won't flower this year. We haven't had a problem with snails eating the hostas in this part of the garden, so that's why we took the chance of buying a lot more to make ribbon along the edge, which we're just coming up to. Unfortunately, the snails have found these hostas, but hopefully they will recover. The grasses which we put behind them to accentuate the river, they're doing fantastic. The raised bed with all the plants that don't mind no water is doing its thing as usual. You will recall that earlier in the year John made this area for his bonsai, and now it's looking quite nice. We also started to develop what we call the trunkery, and the hostas are a bit young this year, and I think they need the addition of some ferns, but by and large we're satisfied, and the snails don't visit them. This is another view of the raised bed.
So panning back along the long bed, looking back towards the house, you'll see that most of the jewels in the bed have gone over. So as always, something goes and we wait for something to replace it. We even have some flowers on the trumpet vine this year. although we feel that these two don't quite get enough sun during the course of the day. But in comparison, these wall troughs don't get too much sun, and so they're looking very good at the moment. Although we are still waiting for the fuchsias to bloom.
The Christo bed's looking good as usual. Again, it does its own thing, even despite the rabbits and the hares that shelter in it. These are more Astromerias that I've bought this year. I like this little corner. I think it's the colours work well. Hope you agree. This is the prairie area, and the wildflowers have been good this year. I guess it's the rain that's helped them. Still not a lot of sign of the seeds that John planted, but we're ever hopeful. The grasses that we planted about 3 or 4 years ago have at last matured. Finally, the shrubbery that was planted in the spring, that hasn't had a lot of help from us, is maturing, but I guess we need to wait a few years before it really comes into fruition. We hope you've enjoyed this tour. There probably won't be another one this year because from now on, no doubt, everything will turn brown as the temperatures rise. I can't remember having green grass in July before.